to just let them into the call, that's all. So guys, I'm Alan Forrest Smith from masterandman.com. I'm an author and a writer, and I've been writing now a long time. Started writing, believe it or not, around 1979 for my punk band originally, but I actually started writing seriously real books. My first actual proper piece of writing was around 1998, and that was because I have a hairdressing background. That was actually an industry manual, but it was a digital book. But that manual had about 1,000 pages, so a huge manual. Oh, someone else coming in now. Oh, here we go. Hi Marta, this is Alan Forrest Smith here, author and writer at masterandman.com. So the first real kind of book I wrote was around 1999. That was about 1,000 pages. It was an industry training manual for the hairdressing industry, which is where I left hairdressing early 2000s. So why should you be listening to me telling you anything about authoring books? Well, I thought right at the beginning it'd be a good idea to show you a couple of things. And basically what these are books that I have, well, this is just a few of them, because in total there's about 20. These are different books. First of all, this is a book we produced for a client, a mentor client. It's a brilliant book called Lucifer and I. It's about 700 pages. A couple of different books ranging from poetry, fiction, kind of what you call self-help books, and a huge business manual, and a couple of business books also. So I'll just show you what I've done. There's this little one here, I Am God, Have You Forgotten Me? That's actually some poetry. A book called Happiness. This book was very highly acclaimed, called I Am Bastard, I Am War, which we are actually having made into a movie. Business book, Silent Sampler. Another piece of poetry, Life, Have You Forgotten Me? Sorry, Why'd You Tease Me? Deliberate Recreation. Another book, about 300 pages. A bigger version of that, because this was a special edition. Has some graphics in there and all that kind of stuff. This huge manual of 600 pages, which is an industry manual for the hairdressing industry, all the way through. My very first published book by a New York publisher was a book called Escape from Humanity. I began in 2008, finished in 2011, and it was published then by Morgan James Publishing. That's that book. And the book I've just actually recently finished, but I'm working on maybe 2 or 3 other books right now, is this book, because I was also a copywriter as well and business consultant for my clients. And it's called The Accidental Copywriter. Again, very highly acclaimed book actually. Somebody else wants to come in, so let me just do this. And that's the most recent book I've done. So, why am I showing you those books, and why am I telling you that I've written around 20 books? I'm currently working on, I'm not sure how many books if I'm honest, it's 3 or 4 books, because I'm always working on a few at a time. I'm also working on, I've just finished a script for a BBC play. I'm also working on a film script, 3 film scripts at the moment actually, and of course writing more books. But I didn't want to come on this call just to endlessly talk about me, because we said in the email that, first of all, I wanted to keep this informal. So I just wanted to share with you what I've done, but I did say on the email that this is more about you than it is about me. I just wanted you to know that this is why you should listen to what I'm talking about. I wanted to talk about the process of starting with an idea for a book. And obviously, this can take years to go through actually. It's not a 2-minute job. Start with the idea of a book you have for a book, and taking the idea and going all the way through and finishing up with a printed book. So, like I said, this book actually became, because I've been blogging now since early 2000s. This book came from one single idea I had on a blog. And the idea was about Zumanity. What was Zumanity in relation to humanity? So that idea took around 4 years to become a book. I have another book I've been working on now for 6 years, and it's my first piece of major fiction. I've written lots of short stories. I've been working on this book for 6 years, and it's about 100,000 words at the moment, so it's going to be a big book, maybe 120,000, 140 when it's finished. But what I'm saying to you is the time it takes. Now, is there a way to fast track a book? Yes. You can avoid all the problems it takes when you're trying to work it out, like I've had to do. So here is some quicker tips for you to get the idea from your head and actually onto paper. And I will tell you right at the beginning, when I wrote that book, Escape from Zoomanity, I was actually in California at the time. I wrote it in California. I'd been there for 3 months. And the first draft I wrote of that book, I actually deleted the whole draft. It was about 40,000 words. But I deleted it because by the time it went to an editor, it was such a mess. I'd written it in one continuous piece. No chapters, no stops, no breaks, no anything. Just pages and pages and pages. And at the time I thought, well, it will be easier for me to rewrite the whole thing than to go through and edit it and break it down and rebuild it, and to frankly do things that I really wasn't that used to doing. So I thought I was write the book from scratch, and that's what I did. But it took me about 6 months later to go back in and start to write that book again. But you can avoid all that stuff. So you start with an idea. The idea is in your head, and you're thinking, you know what, I would love to write a book. Or some of your ideas may be so good, somebody may say to you, you should write a book. Or sometimes you can even have a member of family, you've done a nice story, or even a biography, or anything really. And somebody might say to you, you know what, that would be a great book. And that's how it begins. So you've either planted the idea in your own head, or someone from the outside has also planted the idea in your head. I had kind of no inclination to write a printed book at any point really, until somebody said to me about my blog postings that, you know, Alan, you should really write a book, and that's why I wrote my very first proper book. So here's how I do it, and that's what I want to share with you, because every writer writes things differently. You know, if you read Stephen King's book on writing, which is brilliant by the way, if you're interested in writing books, buy that book. It's an absolute work of genius. I've got it on the shelf over here somewhere. That's actually a book. Stephen King on writing. Why is it so good? Because what Stephen King does there is he breaks down his own process. And it becomes very clear very quickly that his own process is actually pretty unique. And if you're thinking of writing a book yourself, your own process will be quite unique also. So I suppose because I'm a self-taught writer, self-taught author and self-taught thinker or observer of things, I've developed my own self-taught way of writing a book. So here's what I do. When I have an idea for a book, the first thing I do is, I wish I had one of my notepads here to show you. They're all upstairs in my writing room. When I first start off with an idea for a book, I write the book out in note form. Now, does that mean I write this whole book out with pen and paper? Absolutely not. I do prefer to write with a machine, with a computer, with a phone, with a keyboard. That's my preferred way of writing. You may like to write just with a pen and paper. So what I do is, I'm actually working on the follow-up to this book right now. So the first thing I did is I started to gather together the ideas. And the ideas come in the form of chapter headings. So I thought about the book and I thought, what's going to be the perfect follow-up for this book? Why is it progressed? Why is it different? Why is it now 2020 instead of 2008? What's the big difference? So I started to write down chapter headings. And in total, probably for that book, there's probably about 15 to 20 chapter headings. I'm not exactly sure. And those chapter headings will be the initial basis for this book. So that's my first step and my first foundation for the book. And again, I do these in handwritten form in my notebooks. I then take my notebook and I write one chapter heading in the notebook. And then I write all the way around, because I write it in the middle of the page. So say it's called, I don't know, Zoomanity in the middle of the page. Then I write down every idea referring to that one point. And I go round the page, and I point it all back to the word Zoomanity or whatever your idea is in the centre. And that's enough for me. That's enough for me to create the chapter. Because what that does for me is that it stimulates the mind to create the bigger idea with more continuity, more flow, and more ideas develop. Now, when I've got all my chapter headings and they're ready to go, I then go to my computer and I start to write. The way I start to write is I write down all the chapter headings now in my computer. Now, the advantage you have here is you can change everything from the initial idea, because an idea is like a seed. It will grow and develop. And the more you think about the idea, the more you water that idea. And the more you water the idea, the more it develops and begins to grow. And because it begins to grow, so for instance, my wife planted all these little seeds ready to go in the garden. Now, when the seeds are first planted, they have those very round, very thick, very bulbous leaves. But the second set of leaves look like miniatures of the real plant. So, for example, she planted lupin plants. So the lupin plants had the same big, fat, bulbous, round leaves, but the second miniature leaves look like lupins, but in miniature. So the plant begins to develop. An idea is exactly the same. So when you start to write it I write on Apple Pages or Microsoft Word. When you start to write on Pages or Word, the idea will change and the idea will develop. Now, here's one of the secrets and one of the keys. Your ideas have to be fluid. If you have an idea that isn't fluid and an idea that doesn't change, it's not going to work. It will become far too rigid. So once you've written down these chapter headings, 15 or 20 chapter headings on a Microsoft Word document, the way I personally do it is I go to each heading and then I look at the notes surrounding that heading just to regenerate the old ideas, and then I start to write. And that'll hopefully give me 3, 4, 5,000 words around that first, second, third, fourth, and so on chapter heading. And to be honest, that's really how I write my book. Sometimes I find if I start the book from the idea and start to write it, if I move away too soon and don't really complete the initial idea, what I tend to find is the idea will lose its pace. It's the same in fiction, it's the same in business books, it's the same even in poetry or even writing a play or a screenplay for me. It's exactly the same. So you have to start the writing. Don't do any editing or nothing like that. Just keep going and plough on through until you get to the end. So now you have 30, 40, 50,000 words on your Word document. How long should that take you? It depends. I can actually write 3, 4, 5,000 words in a day. I'm not saying I find it easy, but I've been writing for a long, long time now. So it's probably easier for me as a writer to actually do that. But for you, if you are a non-writer, it may be a little slower. It may take you 1,000 or 1,500 words a day. And remember, you won't be writing all day because writing is actually mentally very taxing. So you may only be writing for 2 hours. So the real question is, how many words can I write in 2 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour? If it's in your spare time, you may have been working all day, you may get home, you may want to do some stuff. You know, you have to work out your time. You have to allocate the time, almost like a dental appointment. You cannot miss an appointment. And you know you're going to have to be at the dentist for 2 hours. You lock yourself in the room, you lock the kids away, you lock your wife away, you put the dog downstairs, you find yourself some peace and quiet, you sit in the garden shed, wherever it is, and you do not leave for 2 hours until you've written your allocation or your appointment with yourself for your book. And this starts to become really exciting because suddenly, put it this way, If you do that every day for 7 days and you write 2,000 words a day, you've suddenly got 14,000 words. And 14,000 words is a good foundation for a book. You have to find your pace, you have to find your time, and you have to find your allocation or your self-appointment with yourself. So you've done all that, you've spent 3 months doing that, and you now have 40,000 words. How do you turn those 40,000 words into a good book? The worst thing you can do is give it to somebody at work or somebody close to you, because they may be overcritical and they may tell you things that may upset you emotionally. I'm terrible at taking criticism. Ask my wife. She says, yes, it's great, but you need to do this. And I go, no, don't. Are you looking for a fight? So you have to work what's best for you. But if you have this document all typed up, really what you need to do is you need to find an editor to help you to edit the document. Now, I like to edit my own stuff, but maybe that's still not the best way to do it. But I've not had great experience with editors either. I'm sure there's brilliant editors out there. But you need someone who can give you a critical but constructive eye to help you to bring your book together. So somebody may say to you, which can be a nice constructive thing, you need to say, Alan, you need to bring that chapter idea before this chapter here. So flip the chapters over. Alan, did you realise in chapter 3 and in chapter 9 you've repeated a point? And then of course you have the other type of proofreading, which is the spelling, something I'm terrible at, the typos, the commas, the apostrophes, etc, etc, etc. And then you will have a document as good as ready to go. So here's the good news, you're almost ready to go to print. Of course, before you go to print, you need to work out the other stuff. You know, what's going to go on the cover. You can find people who can do covers very, very cheaply these days. What's going to go in the back on the book. What's going to go in the chapters, if it has chapters. What goes on the inside of the book. Is there a dedication, acknowledgements, and so on and so on and so on. So you have to find out what all the finishing parts of the book are also. If you're not sure and you just have no idea, I'll tell you what I did originally. What I did is I took some of my favourite books just off a shelf and I opened them up and I had a look how they had already been laid out. And I kind of copied my initial book. I thought, well, they have acknowledgements, I'm doing acknowledgements. They have chapters, I'm doing chapters. And that's how I did it initially. So in some cases it wasn't the best way to do it. And I changed that as time went on. But you have to find out how to do the initial layout. But you can also go to places online and find out people who specialise in laying out books properly with chapter headings, acknowledgements, if you need an index at the back or anything like that. You need to find somebody who does that and does the cover. So guys, now you are ready to go to print. It sounds easy, right? But it took me years to do my very first one. But if you're ready to go to print, there's a few ways you can do it. You can self-publish. Now, I self-publish, but I'm not a fan of self-publishing. Now, that's a little bit of a contradiction because I actually have a publishing house. And we set up this publishing house to get around this problem. And the problem was the reason I'm not a fan of publishing. Because as a self-publisher, if you just kind of get it printed and you hand it out, well, you may sell 10 books instead of 10,000. If you're a self-publisher who can get your books printed on demand online, you still have to do the distribution. And you won't really get your message out there, your story out there, your book out there. It's just not going to happen because it's too difficult for you as an individual to do mass distribution. So what we have is, as our publishing house, what we do is, because we have a publishing house with a big publishing account, with the big distribution companies, if you're with a publisher can get you coverage with around 80,000 book buyers and distributors in a second through their online account. So you can suddenly see how important it is that you have a publisher for the book. The second thing with a publisher is, I don't know how many publishers I've been rejected by, but I've been rejected by a lot. That's why I decided to start publishing my own stuff and actually open a publishing house. Because the initial feedback I was getting from my books was, you know, Alan, these are great. I was getting 5-star reviews. You know, somebody said about my war book that, you know, it should be a compulsory reading in every school curriculum. And I thought, well, I'm very critical about my own work. I wasn't sure how good these books were, but people were telling me the books were good. But I couldn't get a publisher. And on top of that, I couldn't get an agent. And an agent is actually the guy or the woman, the person who gets you a publisher. So you need to have an agent or a publisher. By the way, you will have to pay an agent around 15% of anything you make. But an agent will do the things that you don't want to do. For instance, will you want to go around every single book festival and promote your book? No, maybe you don't have time. I don't have time. So a book agent will do that for you. They have distribution channels, networks, and other contacts that they can distribute your writing a lot faster than you possibly can. The same with a publisher. So you have to find a publisher, and okay, we're running out of time. You have to find a publisher, you have to find an agent, and you have to find a proofread editor to get this book. Now guys, we're running out of time now, but basically that's what you need to do to get the book from the idea and into print and into publish. There's only a few of us on the call, which is a perfect opportunity for you to ask me any question before this time runs out.
Either unmute people or they can type it there.
Okay, so you can either, let me find their messages. Here we go. You can type a question if you like. If you want to type a question if you like, and I can also unmute you if you want to ask a question. So how do I do the unmute?
Go to participants, I think, and then click and unmute, I think.
Guys, just for now, because the iPad's frozen, if you have a question, can you type a question in the question box? Anything you want to know about publishing or getting your idea out there. And don't worry, we will be doing more webinars like this. Do you have a question that you would like to ask right now about the publishing?
Or writing.
Publishing, writing, anything to do with books. Let me see if I can unmute.
Is biography harder to write compared to fiction? Martha is asking.
Okay, let me just... The screen keeps freezing.
Did you understand the question?
Here we go, yeah. Hi Martha, is a biography hard to write compared to fiction? Not really. Because by the way, I've done both. With a biography, you're just recalling ideas. You put them into some semblance of order, and you generally know the subject very, very well, although you may find it hard to remember certain things. There's a lot of biographical stuff in this, and sometimes I had to call my mother, my father, and other people in the family to just remind me. So a biography is easier, but there's a secret to a biography, and that's do it in first person and just talk to every single reader. Fiction is more difficult. I've got a huge piece of fiction I've been working on for 6 years. I'm just repeating this for you, Martha, because I think you may have missed this at the beginning. It's going to be about 140,000 words in total, and it's a big family drama. And I found it really tough to write. I've enjoyed writing it, but you have to always find that, you have your main character, they have to develop the character, you have to develop other characters within the story, you have to create conflict meetings, resolution meetings, you have to do all these different things. You have to have tragedy, you have to have triumph, all these wonderful things that we read in books. And you have to have that to some extent in biography, but it's a little bit easier. Okay, so Steve hasn't got a mic, that's fine. So, is that okay for you, Martha? Is that the question answered? Okay, great. Any other questions you want to ask before we go? Because it's looking like we're running out of minutes very quickly now. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you guys have. What was my punk band? My punk band was a band called Clone Youth that we put together in 1978, and we started doing our first gigs in 1979. And the only claim to fame we ever had is we were featured once on the John Peel show on BBC Radio at 10 after 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. in the evening. Thanks for the question anyway. It was cool at the time because I was a singer and we got all the girls. Any more questions, guys? I think we've got 2 minutes. I'm just looking at the clock. 2 minutes left. Any question you would like to ask? Alright guys, well look, stay subscribed to Master Man. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff that's a little bit different. A lot more experience-based stuff, of course, because that's the way I like to do it. Giving you more tips, more advice, and more everything else. That'll be through my main publisher website, masterman.com. If you want to know more about me and my writing and my adventures, you can have a look at alanforestsmith.com. And you can, actually, there's about 12 years of blogs on that website. So you can go in there and read some of that stuff. I've not even seen, probably covering cobwebs and dust after all these years. But thank you guys. I know there's only a few of you here. I really appreciate taking your time. Okay, I really appreciate you taking your time to, you know, just to listen to me ramble on. Thank you everyone. I really appreciate it. Speak soon. Bye. Bye.
I think it was a really good first meeting.
Yeah, I do actually.